Hello friends, this is the Monster King robot from STEAMCODE. We're going to make this project today, but before we do, let's see how this little guy walks. To make the Monster King robot, first find the component parts, which are in this bag. When you open the bag, you will find two smaller bags. One bag has some wooden pieces in it. The other bag has some plastic parts and some screws and the motor in it. And then you'll also find the battery box. You will also need a screwdriver. And it is also helpful to have a pair of scissors. Open up the plastic bag that contains the plastic parts. Inside the plastic bag, you will find a bunch of items. The first items that you will need are the 3 gears, the top and bottom of the gearbox, 2 medium-sized axles, 1 small axle, 3 screws. You can put the other pieces aside. Find the side of the gearbox that looks like this. It says STEAMCODE on one side and it has letters F and S. Flip that over and you should notice that there are several different holes in the back, and you want to find the one hole that's in the top right corner. Place the small axle inside of that hole, then find the smallest gear and place that gear over the axle so that the bumpy part of the gear is up. Next, find the 2 axles that are medium size and find the other 2 gears. One at a time, slip the gears onto the axles so that they're pushed down about halfway. Notice that the 2 gears look different from each other. Find the gear that has 2 sides, one that has a gear on it and one that's smooth. Put the smooth side of the gear down into the hole that's labeled F. From the side it looks like this. When you turn this axle, you should see that both gears move. Insert the remaining axle into the hole that's labeled S so that the protrusion is sticking up. Check to be sure that when you turn any of the axles, all the gears spin. At this point, you should make sure that you have all of the gears looking exactly like mine. Find the other half of the gearbox, line it up so that the axles can come through the holes labeled S and F. Hold them together and flip them over. And note that there are 3 openings. 1, 2, 3. In each of those openings, you will need to insert a screw and use your screwdriver to firmly attach the screw so that both sides of the gearbox are held firmly together. After you have screwed the gearbox together, it should look like this. I have 3 screws firmly in place. Here's what it looks like from the bottom. Notice also that the axles are sticking out at approximately the same distance from each side. Before going on to the next step, again, turn the axles and make sure that all the gears are moving. The next step is to find the wooden body frame that has STEAMCODE written on it. Also, you will need 2 screws and 2 nuts, and of course your gearbox. Find the 2 holes on the gearbox that line up perfectly on the left side of the body frame. Hold the gearbox in place, insert one of the screws through the hole in the gearbox and through the body frame, and attach the nut to the other side. Do the same thing on the other side. While holding the nut in place, use the screwdriver to tighten the screw on each side. Now the gearbox is attached to the body frame. The next step is to find the 2 front legs, 2 plastic cranks, 2 plastic nuts, and 2 metal screws. Notice that on the plastic crank, one side has 3 holes and one side has 2 holes. Line the center hole on the side that has 3 holes. Line the center hole up with the part of the front leg that has the hole. Use the metal screw to attach the 2 together. Attach from behind with the plastic nut. You do not need to make this very tight. You can just use your fingers to do this part. The other side will be opposite. Follow the same procedure. Find the middle hole and line it up with the hole on the leg. Insert the screw. And fasten it with a plastic nut. Again, this does not have to be tight. Notice that these are opposite each other. In the user guide, the picture looks like this. The next step is to attach the front legs to the body. You want to use the top axle and push the crank onto the axle so that the plastic nuts are on the outside. Notice that the plastic nuts are on the outside of the legs. The next step is to find the long axle that you set aside earlier. The long axle is going to be attached to the back of the body in this location using the cable ties. I'm going to be using yellow cable ties so it's easier to see on the video, but your cable ties will be clear or white. Push the cable tie up through the outermost hole and then down through the hole that's behind it. Do not attach it yet. Find the second cable tie and do the same thing. Up through the farthest hole and down through the hole behind. Next, insert the long axle through the loops. Now pull the cable ties tightly so that the axle stays attached. Flip the body frame over and finish attaching and securing the cable ties. After you're finished attaching the long axle, it should look like this. Next, find 2 gears that are left over in your kit that have a smooth portion. Slip these gears onto the long axle on each side. The next step is to find the 2 front legs, 4 plastic nuts, and 2 metal screws. Insert the metal axle in the middle hole of the leg and attach them with a plastic nut. Then attach the front legs to the back legs. Simply line up the holes, insert the metal screw, and attach it with a plastic nut. This does not have to be done tightly. Repeat this procedure on the other side. Next, find the 4 foot frames. Attach the foot frames to the bottom of each foot with the toes pointed toward the side with the gearbox. Here's how it looks after the feet are attached. The next step is to find the motor and the worm gear. Notice that the worm gear has 2 parts. There's a part with a small rectangle on it, and there's a part without a rectangle on it. Find the side with the rectangle on it. That's the side that goes toward the motor. Push that onto the motor, leaving a small amount of space between the worm gear and the motor. Next, push up the contact points on the motor. The next step is to connect the motor and the battery box. You will need to find the assembled motor and also find the battery box with the red and black wires. If you like, you can use a pair of scissors to expose a little bit more wire so that it's easier to connect the battery box and the wires. So carefully, without cutting all the way through the wire, just cut through the insulation with a pair of scissors, and then you can pull off the insulation. Connect the wires to the gear, you need to attach the exposed wire to the openings or the connection point and simply thread the wires through the openings on the contact points and then push them together so that they stay on.